great to see everybody here. It's a great conference. I see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of new ones. And it's a pleasure to be here. This has been a really fun session, a lot of great presentations, so thank you. So today I'm going to describe a 3D map that I recently made for Pinnacles National Park. And for those of you that know me, I kind of have touched on this topic at a few different NACIS conferences, so I'd remind you to bear with me. I just thought that this was a really fun project. There might be some repetition here that I've shared, but hopefully somebody can, you can all glean some good information off of this process and the project that we've done here. Not all maps are suited for 3D, but this was a really good case study. The park kind of came to us with some ideas for developing a new map that needed to address some safety concerns, largely focusing on terrain. And so I thought, okay, well, I started playing with some ideas here, and I thought it worked out quite well. But just a little bit of caution, sometimes it's not always the best case, best approach. But for those of you that haven't been to Pinnacles National Park, just a little bit of background. It's located about 2 hours driving time south of the Bay Area in the Gabion range, and the range is largely consisted of kind of a grassy chaparral landscape with some woodland oaks, and it's located along the San Andreas Fault, and these rocky pinnacles are believed to have been transported about 200 miles from the southeast along that fault, so it creates this kind of unique ecosystem that's really fun to go hike in. It attracts a lot of hikers from the Bay Area. And it's also residence for the California condors that were reintroduced there. And so it's really easy for hikers to scale the trails and find these birds soaring up in the thermals and get real close to these massive giants. It's really quite a place. So my work predominantly with the Park Service is largely consisted of updating maps for the park brochures. We call them the Unigrid brochures. We kind of are constantly working on dozens of projects at the same time, kind of all over the country. But when we go out to a park to design a new brochure map, I'm always kind of keeping in mind that the maps can be repurposed in multiple ways, and this was really evident when I went to Pinnacles to tour the park, and the map that was currently in the brochure was being repurposed all over on trailhead maps and in exhibits and things. So I kind of realized I wanted to keep in mind that the new map might face those same ideas to be repurposed, and so I tend to pack a little more pixels into the relief files, so knowing, okay, this might be enlarged in some way, shape, or form, or there might be some layers in my data that I might not need for the map that I'm making, but somebody down the line might want to use them, so the master files have a few other do not print layers and things like that in them. So I largely like to kind of keep the future use in mind. So the previous map that I was tasked with replacing was made by a colleague and retired member of the Park Service who's in this audience here. Tom actually made this map in 2004, and it was asked to be replaced in 2021 or 2022. This is not uncommon in the Park Service. There's over 425 park units, and so a lot of these maps have a really long lifetime, and they often average anywhere from 15 to 30 years of use, sometimes even more. I've seen some that have been floating around from the late 80s, so they're out there, and but it's I kind of take that with a bittersweet grain of salt that I'm replacing something that embodies all of the key characteristics of NPS design. There's clear design elements throughout, concise content, and a clear visual hierarchy throughout. So it's something that we try to embody with every map that we make, but it's always a little bittersweet replacing a beautiful map that's already out there in the wild. But with this project, this map had been out there, the park had been using it for a long time, and they realized that there were some features that may not have needed the real estate that it was getting. This park is largely wilderness area. And so the kind of northern and southern extents of the parks are devoid of trails, roads, any services. They really kind of discourage visitors from going to those places, and yet, the entirety of the map is shown. And so we quickly realized that, okay, we can crop in on the two major corridors that make up the access to the park, this western road and eastern road. Now, this kind of gets at the root of what safety concerns were coming up. A lot of visitors, and I'm sure folks have realized there are people out there in the world that don't really know how to read maps. And we try to design them as well enough so they're intuitive and people can understand them, but people still were struggling with the fact that these two corridors did not connect. And, there's these beautiful big pinnacle rocky spires in the middle of the park that limits that. And so we really, for this next iteration, we really needed to develop a map that was very evident, and that the elevation was, in the way there. Secondly, over the last few decades, the park has been getting increasing visitation from the Bay Area, and with that, they've been getting more hikers and people that are finding themselves in trouble on these trails because of their steep and rugged nature. And the previous map, while it shows terrain, I guess there just wasn't a connection being made to many of the map readers, and so these visitors would embark on their hike for the day, and all of a sudden realize they're climbing 1,500 feet of elevation in a mile, and they weren't prepared, didn't bring enough water, it gets very hot there. So terrain ended up kind of becoming a key element that needed to be focused on. So I came up with this map view, and after it took months of kind of deliberation of going over various rendering angles and light sources and vertical exaggeration amounts and palettes kind of style, this is ultimately what the park and the team agreed upon, and it really does focus on the heart of Pinnacles and the road networks, but it also contains all of the peripheral elements of the park, the campgrounds kind of away from the heart of the rocks there, and various other hiking trails and things like that. So this is kind of the part of the tour here that I think some of you have seen kind of my processes, but I just want to share a little bit of how I got to this point and how I created this map, and go under the hood a little bit. So to use or to create any 3D views, our team uses Natural Scene Designer to render any layers that are then used in Photoshop and overlaid in Photoshop. That's not to say you could use Blender or any other 3D rendering softwares. This is just our methodology. And I will also, I'm very, very aware that my layering system and the number of layers that I use can get a little out of hand, but there's adjustments large and small throughout here. It's kind of my nature. Tom used to just flatten files like a madman and drive us all crazy, so I can't get to that point yet, but here we are. So I always start with just rendering a general shaded relief with the view and the light source that I'd like. And with that, use Leland Brown's beautiful terrain texture shader to render as well, and then blend those together. There's a lot of contrast to this, but I like to start with that. So with the shaded reliefs, I can at least isolate those highlights and shadows right away and use those later on in the project. Because the Gabillon Range is really dry and it's the chaparral environment, I wanted to kind of tamp down everything with a beigey kind of gradient of from lower elevations to lighter tones in the higher elevations. And I kind of start with a really light base because you end up adding numerous other layers that kind of build and add more visual noise and complexity and a little more darkness. So we start there. Oh, and I also have things highlighted in the bottom there, but I'll be sharing these slides later for those that are interested. Then I'll take those isolated illumination layers of highlights and shadows, and sometimes we'll will deviate based on elevation, and so like sometimes I'll add a little extra color for the higher elevations and give them like a little alpenglow or something like this. But yeah, there is a little more emphasis on the higher peaks just to give that some more emphasis that that terrain is a little higher up. I also wanted to illustrate the oak woodlands in the valleys, and because this park gets really, really hot in the summer and people need some relief, we wanted to show those areas where those trees are and where they can go picnic in the afternoon to kind of cool down. After I've kind of got my base map looking fairly good, I'll make a number of little touch-ups. Those are always, I can't go without them, but I also bring in the park background, or the park boundary, which is an SVG file that you can render from Natural Scene Designer, import that into Photoshop based on the map's extent, and then we'll kind of mask out anything beyond the park's boundary, and this is because we need to include other elements in the layout. This is a bilingual brochure, so there's a lot of text and other images and elements that need to go in. So it kind of just focuses the viewer on the park and not the areas outside of it. And yeah, so while I'm doing that, while I'm working on the base relief, I'm also jumping back and forth into Adobe Photoshop and adding all that vector information. And it's just try to get to a place where everything is balanced, and I feel like it's looking pretty good. It's kind of this back and forth throughout. So finally, getting to kind of the safety aspect of this project, I'm outside of cartography, my main passion is skiing, and so I like to kind of borrow ideas from that. And the Park Service, we've borrowed this kind of trail difficulty characterizations in the past, but I feel like non-skiers can kind of get what these green, blue, and blacks colors mean for what they're getting into on a trail. We worked with the park to ensure that each trail was coded as it should based on trail distances, the elevation gradients that were involved, or just some that might take a long time even though they're on flat terrain. But we came up with this system, and with the Park Service, we're increasingly striving to make our maps as accessible as possible, and that means we have to adhere to color contrast ratios and for both labels and other map content. So even just having green, blues, and blacks, they have to have a various ratio that are recognized. But we also we can't solely rely on color for key map information. So with this map, I added just the ubiquitous green circles, the blue squares, and black diamonds to add that other layer of information, so they're more accessible for more of an audience. And finally, this is the final brochure. I mentioned earlier it is bilingual in English and Spanish, so all the text that's written in there has to be doubled, which takes up quite a bit of space. But we also were pretty liberal with the use of like dark red on the map side. It might be a little difficult to see there, but that was just to emphasize, okay, yeah, the roads don't connect. It's hot, bring water, and yeah, like be sure to use this color coding for trails to get through your day without falling yourself into any trouble or anything like that. So with that, you can find the map at nps.gov/carto. We have all of our maps there, free to download. You can get just a PDF, JPEGs, or the full-on Adobe print production files that you can do whatever you'd like with. And yeah, if anybody has any questions or wants to talk about this project or look under the hood with me, I'm happy to share throughout the rest of the conference here. So thank you very much. Okay. Yeah. See a lot of hands. We'll start right here. So the question is there any efforts to do something like an analysis of the amount of people that are finding themselves in trouble in parks like this, and are related to the maps, or pre and post rollout? Yeah, I wish I could say yes, there is. The Park Service is, they're understaffed, and there's more and more visitation every year. So I wish that there was studies like that happening, but I can't say that there are. Yeah, I guess I'd be happy to check in with the park, in a year or so, and just see if they've noticed any differences with their communication. It goes beyond the park brochure as well. I mean, there's a lot of other means. There's a lot of information that's shown on the websites and things like that that can illustrate those safety concerns. So, yeah, thanks. Tom. Oh, yeah. I did. The question is, the High Peaks Trail is very steep, and did I consider a double black diamond? I actually did. Yeah, there's sections that have like bolted in rebar and things that you have to climb ladders up really steep rocks. I would like to have done that, but yeah, I think that might draw more attention to it than anything. So, Anna. The question is, did I roll or distort the DEM in the render? The answer is no. I did apply some kind of background haze and foreground kind of dark gradients to kind of train the eye towards the center part of the park. It's a cool technique that Tom has done in the past. It is a lot of work, and so I found I didn't need to do it with this render. So. Yeah, Martin? Sure. The question is, when are we going to start including burned areas on our maps with the increasing number of wildfires that are affecting the parks? That's a great question. Oftentimes it's based on park to park, whatever their staff wants to show. I know, recently I worked on a map for Glacier National Park, which has a patchwork of burned areas. The western half is mostly burned, and they chose to show that area as still forested vegetation, even though it is a forest. It currently doesn't look like one, but it kind of is on a case-by-case basis. Every park has a different decision-making process and different needs, so we kind of do it on a case-by-case basis. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the question is there a plan to move forward with kind of a standardized approach to symbolizing our trails with this? I would say we don't ever strive for, we don't want to shoehorn ourselves into any key standards, but it depends on the park. And a lot of parks that have, that emphasize hiking or recreation in that manner, they are in favor of showing trail designations like this. So it's something that I think we're using more and more these days, but it also does kind of raise the visual hierarchy and the importance of the trails to the top with these big call-out boxes. So it depends on the park and if that's something they really want to emphasize or if there's other information that they'd prefer to maintain there. So we'll go Carl back there. Yeah, the question is, what was the process for adding Spanish and making the brochure bilingual, essentially? Previously, we did have a Spanish speaker in our office. That person has since retired, and so we rely on the parks to provide that information. And so we will send an earlier draft. Well, I guess we'll send an earlier draft of the text and the map to the park, and they'll have somebody provide a translation for us. As far as like trail and like physical labels and things like that, we only abide by the Board on Geographic Names names. We won't do translations for those, but a lot of the legend information is bilingual. Matthew. Yeah. Yeah, the question is, did we consider using the colors for the trails, like lengths and things like that themselves, the lines? We kind of are still sticking with black dash trails. That a lot of that does go into the accessibility component of all of this. If we have some green trails that are largely in the lowland areas, those are also going through the forested areas. It makes it increasingly more difficult to have that contrast that we need. So it's a lot easier to just have a call-out box to indicate that. Lots of questions. Gabe?
So if you weren't using colors to designate one trail from another as far as difficulty, and they had these call-out boxes, a lot of times in our work, we need to signify that the trail continues past a junction of trails. How did you do that on your map?
Well, that's a good question. So the question is, how do we signify trails that might go through various junctions, trail junctions and things like that? There's still a little bit of a gray area there. We do basically set up trail segments and little carrots with distances between each one, and we'll anchor in here. Let me see if I can find it. Oops. But anyways, without going into this, we will try to anchor that call out and that label with the distance markers to cover as much of the trail sections as we can. And then there's more information on the website and throughout the brochure that kind of goes into the full extent of what each trail takes up. Sometimes we add charts to maps that show which trails go for certain distances, but yeah, we try to be as inclusive as possible for each trail, but then you have these little segments that are, a tenth of a mile here, a tenth of a mile there, and you just can't add a little call out for every one of those, so we have to be a little selective there. All right, thank you very much, appreciate you.
Well, I was right. That was a great session. So once again, please join me in another round of applause for all 5 of our awesome presenters. That was really fantastic.